The beginning was everything you expect from a story people envy, the kind you post in highlight reels. Madison walked into my life like she owned every room she entered, and somehow she made me feel chosen. We met at a friend's rooftop party, the kind with string lights, overpriced wine, and quiet bragging floating in the air. She laughed at my awkward joke, touched my arm, and suddenly I felt like I was the most interesting guy there. We talked about work, ambitions, childhood memories, and silly things like our guilty pleasure songs from high school. She told me she admired my calm energy, said I felt like a quiet harbor in a noisy world, and I believed her. In those first months, everything felt effortless, like we fit into each other's rhythms without trying. Sunday mornings became sacred, shared coffee, warm sunlight, her head resting on my chest while I played soft guitar chords. She dragged me to art galleries and rooftop mixers, introducing me proudly, fingers threaded through mine like we were perfect. I took her hiking, showed her hidden trails and quiet lakes, places where the world felt gentle and honest. We laughed easily then, planned weekend trips, debated movies, shared playlists, and talked about the kind of life we wanted. I thought we were building something solid, something real, something worth fighting for in a world full of disposable feelings. She called me thoughtful, reliable, said she had never felt so steady with someone, and pride bloomed in my chest. I didn't see the cracks forming, didn't hear the quiet shift in tone when she described my personality as comfortable. I missed the way she started glancing at other men at parties, her eyes lingering just a second too long. I ignored how she began dressing like she was going to an audition for a life, just slightly beyond our own. In those early days, her admiration felt sincere, and I mistook admiration for affection, affection for permanence. We shared dreams then, tiny fantasies about future homes, dogs, vacations, silly traditions we would invent together. She teased me gently about my guitar practice, kissed my forehead when I got frustrated at learning new chords. When I talked about a book I loved or a project at work, she listened, nodded, asked questions, smiled warmly. I didn't know moments like that can fade slowly, like the last light before dusk, unnoticed until darkness settles. But back then, her smile made sense, her voice felt safe, and love felt like a soft place to land. Friends said we looked good together, called us balanced, her fire and my calm, chaos and quiet in harmony. And I believed them, believed her, believed in us, because sometimes hope blinds you more than heartbreak ever could. Those early days were golden, untouched by doubt, before ambition began whispering in her ear louder than I could. Before she looked at me and saw stability as a cage instead of comfort, and calm as weakness instead of strength. Back then, love felt like certainty, not a gamble, not a competition, not a measuring scale with invisible weights. And maybe that was my first mistake, thinking love stayed still just because we held on tightly. I didn't know yet that holding on means nothing if the other person is already looking for a new horizon. And in those gentle, glowing beginnings, I never once imagined she would someday call me her biggest compromise. It didn't fall apart in one dramatic moment. Not at first, not in a way that anyone else would notice. It started with tiny comments, soft at the edges but sharp underneath, disguised as playful teasing. She would laugh and say, "You're such a creature of habit," like routine was something pitiful, not peaceful. When friends bragged about traveling or launching startups, she would glance at me like I'd missed a train. At dinner with her coworkers, she joked I was the stable boyfriend, the one who didn't dream loud enough. Everyone laughed, and I smiled too, because pretending it didn't sting felt easier than making a scene. She praised men who spoke in buzzwords and shook hands like they were claiming territory, instead of greeting people. At home, she scrolled through highlight reels of successful couples, whispering, "Their goals," while sitting next to me. She began calling passion obsession when I worked on my projects, and calmness, lack of ambition when I rested. My guitar strumming became background noise she tolerated, not music she once swayed to on Sunday mornings. When I showed her a small breakthrough in my coding project, she smiled politely, eyes already drifting to her phone. Cute, she said again, the same word a parent uses for a child's crayon drawing. Each time she used it, something inside me dulled, like a string getting quietly cut one by one. She started saying things like, I just feel like there's more out there, as if life with me was a limited trial version. Her tone changed too, admiration turning into analysis, warmth replaced by subtle disappointment. She introduced me less as her boyfriend and more as Alex, he's in software, like it was an apology. Her compliments faded into suggestions, suggestions into critiques, critiques into quiet judgment disguised as concern. Suddenly I was too routine, too steady, too grounded, too normal, too everything she no longer romanticized. She craved chaos disguised as ambition, noise disguised as success, wild dreams without the patience to build them. I tried to match her energy, to prove I wasn't stuck, doing anything to bridge a gap only she kept widening. I started rock climbing because she said I needed adventure, even though I hated heights and she never came once. I took her to new restaurants, booked spontaneous weekend plans, but spontaneity felt like performing instead of living. I stayed up late working on ideas, reading business blogs, trying to speak in words that impressed her world. But every effort felt graded, and I was always just shy of the invisible standard she pretended didn't exist. Her friends praised men with vision, and she nodded like she was taking notes in a class I didn't know I enrolled in. Sometimes she looked at me like she was already imagining someone else beside her, someone louder, shinier, more dramatic. And I told myself it was just a phase, that love meant patience, that people drift sometimes and find their way back. I convinced myself this was growth, not decay, that we were evolving, not unraveling thread by thread. But love doesn't slowly make you feel smaller if it's healthy, doesn't make you shrink to fit someone's fantasy. I didn't realize yet that I wasn't changing too little. She was simply changing away from me, not with me. And the worst part wasn't losing her admiration. It was watching her pretend it was still there long after it disappeared. The night everything shifted wasn't loud or explosive, just a quiet unraveling at a fancy restaurant. We were celebrating my promotion. At least that's what I thought, and I showed up ready to share the moment with her. She arrived in a dress that shimmered like she was auditioning for a life bigger than the one we shared. I told her about the raise, the new responsibilities, how proud I felt after years of effort finally paying off. She didn't smile, not really, just nodded like I'd told her the weather forecast for a city she didn't live in. That's good, she said, swirling her wine. But don't you ever want something more? More than building something meaningful, more than stability, more than a future. More sounded like a door she was already halfway through, and I was still standing in the hallway. She talked about power couples, ambition, people who didn't just live life but dominated it. I asked whether she was proud of me, and she looked surprised, like the question itself was small. You're steady, Alex, she replied. Comfortable, safe, it's nice. Nice. I don't know when nice became an insult, but that night it landed like a punch. I tried to explain how contentment isn't failure, how quiet dreams matter too, how peace is not the absence of ambition. She sighed as if I was a child refusing to grow up, refusing to see the bigger picture she imagined for herself. Then she asked the question that tore something inside me loose. Don't you ever wonder if you could aim higher? Aim higher than what? A life I worked for, a love I thought was real, a future shaped with intention instead of insecurity. My fork froze midair, and silence suddenly felt heavier than noise ever could. I realized then that she measured worth not by character, but by the shine of the trophies people carried. And I was not a trophy. I was a life partner, and she didn't value that anymore. Walking home, she talked about an influencer couple buying a penthouse, their grind mindset, their luxury routines. I nodded quietly, letting her words wash over me like cold rain I stopped trying to shelter from. In bed, she scrolled through other people's lives while I stared at the ceiling, feeling smaller with every swipe. For the first time, I wondered whether love can turn into comparison if you stop tending to it. I wondered when admiration had turned into expectation, and expectation into disappointment. The truth came not from her words, but the absence of warmth when she looked at me. You can tell when someone stops rooting for you. Their eyes harden, their patience thins, their jokes cut deeper. I felt it in every sigh, every dismissive nod, every time she said, someday, like the present wasn't worth noticing. And I realized the saddest part wasn't that she wanted more. It was that she never stopped to ask whether I wanted more with her, not without her. Some endings don't start with goodbye. They start with doubt whispered between forkfuls of expensive food. That night, I didn't lose her. I simply saw, for the first time, that she was already gone. I wish I could say the truth hit me in a dramatic flash, but it arrived in quiet pieces I ignored too long. The night I discovered everything started with something simple, a dead laptop battery and a forgotten charger. I drove to my office late, thinking nothing of it, focused on fixing a bug in my app that had been haunting me. The building was empty, silent except for the hum of lights and my footsteps echoing down the hallway like doubt. After grabbing my charger, I decided to stop by the 24-hour cafe across the street for coffee before heading home. That's where I saw her. Madison, sitting in a corner booth, leaning forward, laughing softly like she hadn't in months with me. Across from her sat a man in a sleek suit, sharp jaw, expensive watch, confidence dripping like cologne. She touched his arm while laughing, a gesture intimate in a way you don't do with strangers or coworkers. My breath stopped, and I froze outside the window, heart pounding but mind eerily calm, like shock numbs emotion. I didn't storm in or make a scene. I just watched long enough to know it wasn't innocent, not a business meeting. Her smile was different, not forced, not polite, but bright, alive, the smile she used to save for me. I walked away before she could see me, a strange clarity settling in like ice forming quietly over water. I went home alone, sat in the dark living room, and waited for her like a man testing a truth he already knew. She came home past midnight, smelling like perfume and ambition, claiming she stayed late working on campaigns. I looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face and borrowed affection. The next morning, I confronted her gently, gave her space to tell the truth, to choose honesty over pride. I saw you at the cafe last night, I said. Who was he? She froze, eyes wide. Then anger flared to mask fear, a defense of someone who knows they've been caught. He's just a client, she said, voice too fast, too light, too rehearsed for real innocence. Late-night coffee with arm touches and whispered laughter isn't professional, and she knew it. Eventually, she exhaled, shoulders collapsing, truth spilling like a confession she'd been waiting to release. His name was Ethan. They'd been talking for months, about dreams, ambition, possibilities beyond routine and stability. I just feel alive around him, she whispered, as if that excuse softened the betrayal. And I don't make you feel alive, I asked quietly, already knowing the answer. You're safe, she said, but sometimes safety feels like settling. Those words cut deeper than dishonesty, not betrayal of loyalty, but betrayal of worth. I stood there, feeling my heart break in slow motion, but my self-respect lifting like a rising tide. If you think you can do better, I said, voice steady despite shaking hands, then go do better. She reached for me, panic flickering, realizing too late what she'd gambled and how badly she miscalculated. I just need to figure things out, she pleaded. I don't want to lose you. But love isn't a backup plan, and I refused to be her safety net while she shopped for replacements. I packed a bag and walked out, leaving behind 3 years and the version of myself that begged for her approval. She didn't chase me then. In her mind, she believed she was stepping up, leveling up, trading comfort for brilliance. But sometimes the brightest lights burn out fastest. And I chose dignity over desperation, silence over self-betrayal, and the unknown over being second choice. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling free or empowered. Heartbreak doesn't work like highlight reels online. I woke up on my friend Mark's couch, neck stiff, chest heavy, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Mark handed me coffee and didn't say anything at first, because real friends know silence sometimes speaks better than advice. Eventually he said, "You didn't lose her, man. You stopped losing yourself." And for the first time, I breathed easier. I focused on breathing, eating properly again, taking walks just to feel my feet hit the ground and remind me I existed. I poured my hurt into work, stayed late on projects, built features for my app with quiet determination and shaking hands. Every keystroke felt like stitching a tear. Every solved bug proof that progress happens in tiny, stubborn movements. I picked up my guitar again, fingers awkward at first, like grief had rewired my muscles and hope slowly retrained them. Sunday mornings returned, coffee, sunlight, quiet, but this time the peace didn't feel like something I owed someone. I joined a hiking group Mark recommended, partly to avoid staying indoors with my own thoughts too long. That's where I met Emily. She didn't walk in like a movie scene or spark fireworks. She simply smiled and matched my pace on a steep trail. She joked about her terrible balance and how dogs judge her when she slips on dirt, and suddenly I was laughing again. She asked what I did for work, and when I told her, she didn't compare or measure, she just said, "That's awesome." No patronizing tone, no subtle disappointment, just genuine curiosity like my existence wasn't a resume to evaluate. We began hiking side by side each week, not flirting at first, just two weary people finding rhythm in shared breath. Over time, she asked about my music, and when I mentioned open mic nights, her eyes lit up like it mattered. "You should play more," she said simply. "People deserve to hear something you care about." Those words sank into me like sunlight into cold skin. Warm, quiet, healing. She talked about animals she treated at her clinic. Stories full of compassion and small miracles that didn't need applause. One morning after a long hike, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee, and I realized I was smiling before answering. Our first date wasn't extravagant, no rooftop bars, no carefully curated scenes, just pasta at a tiny Italian place. We talked for hours about books, childhood dreams, embarrassing teenage phases, and the little joys people overlook. She didn't need me to be impressive. She needed me to be honest, present, human. One night I played at an open mic again, nerves buzzing, and she showed up early, cheering louder than anyone else. Afterward, she hugged me like I'd done something extraordinary, even though it was just 3 songs and shaky fingers. "You look alive when you play," she whispered. "I love seeing that." That sentence alone felt like glue rebuilding something inside me that had cracked months before. Slowly, I stopped wondering if I wasn't enough and started believing I always had been. With Emily, I didn't have to chase being valued. I simply was. And every step forward with her reminded me, real love doesn't demand you be someone else to deserve it. 5 months passed quietly, filled with slow mornings, small victories, and a peace I didn't know I needed. I had stopped looking back, stopped replaying old conversations, stopped wondering what I could have done different. Then one evening my phone buzzed with a name I thought I'd never see again, a ghost resurfacing without warning. Madison. For a moment I just stared at the screen, heartbeat steady, no panic, just a dull curiosity like reading an old file. Her first message was short, "Can we talk?" But desperation leaks through even the smallest cracks. I ignored it, not out of anger, but because I didn't feel obligated to reopen a door I'd already sealed. But ghosts are persistent. Her messages multiplied, shifting tone from casual to pleading, each one heavier than the last. "Please answer. It's important. I really need help." Emily saw the texts and simply held my hand. No jealousy, no insecurity, just quiet understanding. I finally called Madison, not for closure, but because ignoring suffering never sat right with me, even when it came from her. When she answered, her voice cracked like glass, brittle, tired, miles away from the polished confidence she used to wear. She told me Ethan wasn't who she thought, that his promises dissolved the moment she uprooted her life to follow him. He had a family, a wife, kids, a future already built that she had foolishly believed she could replace. She quit her job, sold her furniture, burned every professional bridge like she was lighting a path to her better life. Except the path ended at a cliff, and now she was stranded across the country with nothing but regret and 3 suitcases. She expected champagne and penthouses, but got borrowed couches and job rejections instead. The world she chased didn't catch her. It watched her fall. She cried hard, breath shaking, pride shattered, begging not for love but for rescue. "I don't have anyone else," she whispered, like I was still supposed to be her emergency exit. She asked for money, enough to fly home, restart, rebuild the ruins she created chasing someone shinier. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old instinct, the urge to help, to protect, to fix what was broken. But then I remembered the nights she made me feel small, the way she measured love in ambition and value in validation. I remembered how she left before she ever physically walked away. And I realized pity is not love, and compassion cannot replace self-respect. I told her calmly that I couldn't give her what she wanted, not money, not comfort, not a second chance. "You didn't just choose him," I said. "You chose a life without me because you thought it would be better." Silence filled the line, thick, heavy, filled with all the things she never saw until they were gone. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "No," I replied. "You made a decision, and now you're living its truth." Before she hung up, she asked the question pride wouldn't let her avoid. "Is there really no chance for us?" I looked at Emily across the room, laughing quietly at something on her laptop, sunlight catching her hair like gold. "No," I said softly, "because someone else sees me as enough and you never did." And that was the last time the past tried to reclaim me. Some doors don't close with anger. They close with understanding, and the realization you never needed them open. I didn't feel victorious after that final call. Closure rarely arrives with fanfare or dramatic triumph. It arrived quietly, like waking up one day and realizing the ache in your chest finally loosened. I blocked her number not out of anger, but because peace deserves protection once you earn it. Life moved forward in gentle ways, not forced, not desperate, just steady steps toward something real. Work flourished, my app caught attention, and opportunities opened I once doubted I deserved. Emily and I built small routines, shared breakfasts, late-night conversations, laughter that filled the rooms softly. She framed a photo of me playing guitar and placed it on a shelf like it was something precious. No applause, no spotlight, just pride quiet enough to feel honest. I learned love isn't loud, isn't flashy, isn't a competition for the brightest life or the biggest dream. It's someone choosing your ordinary as their favorite place to be. And when I finally looked back, there was no bitterness, just gratitude for the lesson. Sometimes losing someone teaches you the worth they never saw. Sometimes the person they left behind becomes someone they never deserved to know.